What do Frank Sinatra, Elizabeth Taylor, and Peter O'Toole all have in common? Not just the glitz, the acclaim, or the unforgettable roles. Behind the shimmering curtain of old Hollywood glamour was something much darker, something that haunted even the most beloved stars of their time: addiction. For decades, Hollywood icons maintained flawless personas on camera while silently drowning behind the scenes. Many battled their demons in private, others spiraled in full public view, and some never made it out at all. This isn't just a list of names, it's a journey into the silent war waged behind closed doors. Some of these celebrities drank themselves out of careers, others into early graves. Some fought back, checked into rehab, and came out stronger, only to relapse when the pressure returned. Their stories are shocking, sobering, and surprisingly unknown. We're not here to shame or sensationalize. We're here to reveal the untold reality that fame often conceals, how substance abuse quietly shaped, strained, and sometimes shattered the lives of Hollywood's most iconic stars. These are the real stories, the whispered confessions, the late-night binges, the failed interventions, and the haunting final acts. From stars who drank whole bottles daily to those who lost everything after just one too many nights, these are the 25 most infamous alcoholics in Hollywood history. What they endured is a cautionary tale not just about addiction, but about the price of fame itself. And we begin not with a footnote, but with a legend. A man so revered, yet so wrecked by his own habits, his friends called themselves the Olympic drinking team. Many of these stories have never been told in full. Some were covered up by studio executives, others buried under decades of silence. But the truth always finds a way to surface, and when it does, it's often more heartbreaking than anyone imagined. These stories offer a rare glimpse behind the velvet ropes into dressing rooms, trailer parks, and hotel suites where Hollywood's brightest stars faced their darkest hours alone. Frank Sinatra wasn't just the chairman of the board, he was the king of charisma, the swaggering symbol of cool. But behind the slick suits and soulful crooning, Sinatra had a fiery temper and a nearly mythic tolerance for alcohol. His drink of choice? Jack Daniels. And he didn't just sip it, he embraced it. According to close friends, Sinatra downed entire bottles daily. His precise recipe was legendary: 4 ice cubes, 2 fingers of Jack, and just a splash of water, served in a classic tumbler. But Sinatra wasn't just drinking for fun. Those who knew him say he used booze as both fuel and armor. Fuel for his nightlife persona, and armor against the crushing pressures of fame. It worked until it didn't. His drunken episodes were notorious. He once turned violent after drinking gin, leading his ex-wife to lock herself in a room for safety. On set or in clubs, his mood could flip like a switch, especially after a few too many. Then there was Richard Burton, a man with a thunderous voice and a tragic thirst. In the 1970s, Burton reportedly consumed up to 3 bottles of vodka per day. By his standards, 2 bottles meant he was sober. He even promised one director he'd cut back to just 1 bottle a day. Despite this, Burton still delivered an Oscar-nominated performance in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, showing how talent can survive even as the body breaks down. But the toll was visible. During The Klansman, Burton could barely stand upright, requiring scenes to be filmed seated or lying down. Eventually, he checked himself into rehab and attempted sobriety. It was too late. Years of abuse had ravaged his body. He died in 1984 from liver cirrhosis and kidney failure, his brilliance dimmed by the bottle. He was just one of many legends whose genius couldn't protect them from the grip of addiction, a warning echoed again and again in Tinseltown's tragic history. Joan Crawford may have been the face of old-school elegance, but her drinking habits were anything but polished. After marrying the CEO of PepsiCo, she became the company's public ambassador, a role that saw her traveling the globe. But behind the corporate smile was a woman with a suitcase full of liquor. At every stop, Crawford demanded a specific list of beverages: multiple fifths of bourbon, gin, and scotch, 2 bottles of champagne, and, of course, a case of Pepsi, though few believe she ever drank it all. Leonard Nemoy, beloved worldwide as Mr. Spock from Star Trek, had his own hidden battle. While fans saw the calm, logical Vulcan, Nemoy was privately unraveling. Long hours on set and the pressure to maintain an iconic character drove him to the bottle. Co-star William Shatner noted how Nemoy used alcohol as a shield against fame's overwhelming demands. What began as an occasional drink soon spiraled into a daily necessity. Eventually, Nemoy sought help. After Star Trek wrapped, he entered rehab and committed to turning his life around. But addiction, as always, is a stubborn foe. Though he conquered alcohol, he shifted to another vice: cigarettes. That addiction would eventually claim his life decades later. These two stars, one a screen siren, the other a sci-fi legend, shared more than fame. They shared the quiet devastation of addiction that crept into their lives while the cameras rolled and the world watched unaware. Their stories reveal how even those at the pinnacle of power and recognition are not immune to the darkness waiting behind every standing ovation. Even decades later, fans are shocked to learn the extent of their struggles. Crawford's glamour masked a deep dependence, while Nemoy's calm exterior belied years of quiet desperation. Their legacies endure, but so do the hard lessons they left behind, reminders of what fame can hide and how isolation fuels addiction in the most public lives. Elizabeth Taylor wasn't just a Hollywood icon, she was also a pioneer in addiction recovery. At the height of her fame, in 1983, she made headlines by becoming the first major celebrity to check herself into the Betty Ford Center. It was a shocking move at the time. Rehab wasn't something stars did publicly, let alone women of Taylor's stature, but she did it anyway, shattering the silence around addiction in Hollywood. Her addiction to alcohol and prescription pills had been spiraling for years. Lavish parties, failed marriages, and constant media pressure created a toxic cocktail she could no longer ignore. But Taylor didn't just seek help, she transformed her pain into purpose. After getting clean, she used her fame to champion AIDS research and addiction awareness, showing the world that recovery wasn't just possible, it could be powerful. Carrie Grant, meanwhile, chose a very different path to healing. Known for his elegance and charm, Grant secretly battled alcoholism in the 1950s, but instead of traditional rehab, he turned to a then controversial treatment, LSD therapy. Under the guidance of his doctor, Grant underwent over 100 sessions of psychedelic-assisted therapy. Surprisingly, he claimed it helped him find inner peace, overcome his trauma, and reframe his relationship with alcohol. Though their approaches were worlds apart, both Taylor and Grant broke taboos and faced their addictions head-on. Their willingness to confront their demons, and to do so in front of the world, opened doors for countless others suffering in silence. Their stories remain a powerful testament to the possibility of change, even in an industry that often celebrates excess. In many ways, they rewrote the narrative around addiction, one through public activism, the other through personal transformation. By refusing to be defined by their lowest moments, they became unexpected champions for mental health and recovery. Their influence extends far beyond film, leaving a legacy of resilience that still inspires. Oliver Reed had the kind of screen presence that couldn't be ignored, fiery, charismatic, and often terrifyingly intense. He brought iconic villains to life and left audiences mesmerized, but behind his performances was a man consumed by alcohol. His drinking wasn't just recreational, it was part of his identity. Known to start bar fights and once requiring over 60 stitches after a drunken brawl, Reed became infamous for his wild lifestyle. He even earned the role of Proximo in Gladiator in a drunken audition. Michael Landon, by contrast, was the picture of American wholesomeness. His roles in Bonanza and Little House on the Prairie made him a symbol of family values and clean living. But away from the camera, Landon had his own hidden habit. He was a functioning alcoholic who often disguised vodka in his coffee on set. Co-stars had no idea how much he drank, until years later, when stories emerged about his quiet dependency. Actress Melissa Gilbert, who played his daughter on Little House, later admitted that Landon's drinking subtly shaped her own relationships, particularly her attraction to men who smelled like alcohol. But Landon didn't stop at liquor. He was also a heavy smoker, reportedly going through 4 packs of unfiltered cigarettes a day. In the end, both men succumbed to the toll of addiction. Reed died in a tavern in Malta after a drinking contest that included rum, beer, and countless shots. Landon, ravaged by cancer, passed away at just 54. One lived loudly, the other quietly, but their battles with addiction were no less devastating. Their stories remind us that alcoholism isn't always loud. It can be slow, secret, and still utterly destructive. Their lives followed different scripts, but both ended in tragedy, shaped by choices no amount of fame could fix. Whether celebrated in headlines or hidden behind smiles, their struggles were real, and a chilling echo of how far addiction can reach. Dean Martin was the ultimate image of smooth sophistication. With a glass in hand and a smirk on his face, he embodied the laid-back crooner who made boozing look like an art form. But the truth was more calculated than carefree. According to his daughter, Martin's signature drunken act on stage was often just that, an act. Many nights, that whiskey glass held nothing more than apple juice. Offstage, he preferred quiet dinners at home over rowdy parties, proving that sometimes the illusion of drunkenness was a necessity. In contrast, Barbara Payton's spiral was heartbreakingly real. Once a rising starlet who shared the screen with legends like Gary Cooper and James Cagney, she had the looks, the talent, and the momentum. But her personal life was a disaster zone. As her fame waned, her alcohol use escalated. She was repeatedly arrested for public intoxication and disorderly conduct. Reports surfaced of her passing bad checks and even resorting to prostitution as her financial and emotional stability collapsed. Payton's downfall wasn't just a story of lost fame, it was a complete unraveling. Her final years were spent in and out of jail, sleeping in bus stations and haunting bars along Sunset Boulevard. She lost custody of her son, her home, and ultimately her health. She died at just 39 from heart and liver failure, a cautionary tale of how quickly Hollywood's spotlight can turn into a glaring searchlight on one's worst moments. Together, Martin and Payton show the two extremes, one who used alcohol as a performance prop, and another who used it as an escape. In the end, it wasn't about how much they drank, but how deeply their choices defined and ultimately destroyed their lives. Their stories sit on opposite ends of the same spectrum, one carefully curated, the other heartbreakingly chaotic. But both are reminders of how alcohol can shape a life, whether through illusion or irreversible descent. John Barrymore was considered one of the greatest actors of his time, a master of Shakespeare and drama with a voice that commanded every room. But behind the curtain, he battled a dependence so severe that at one point, he was caught trying to drink his wife's perfume. His decline was swift and merciless. By the time he was filming Dinner at 8 in 1933, Barrymore had already become a caricature of himself, playing an alcoholic actor while barely functioning sober. Peter O'Toole, with his striking eyes and effortless talent, might have been one of the most charismatic actors in history, but he too embraced alcohol as part of his public persona. In interviews, he spoke openly, and often proudly, about performing while drunk. During the filming of Lawrence of Arabia, both he and co-star Omar Sharif were reportedly drunk during scenes involving camel raids, a fact O'Toole laughed about later, saying he barely remembered shooting them. Then there was Robert Shaw, most famously known for his role as Quint in Jaws. Shaw's off-screen behavior mirrored his character's hard-drinking intensity. During the film's production, he clashed with co-star Richard Dreyfuss, often showing up drunk and argumentative. The tension peaked when Dreyfuss finally tossed Shaw's scotch into the ocean out of frustration. These three actors were titans of talent, yet each was slowly undone by their addictions. They brought fire to their performances, but paid for it in health, relationships, and sometimes dignity. Their stories are reminders that brilliance doesn't shield anyone from destruction, and that sometimes the greatest tragedies happen off stage. Even as they delivered unforgettable lines and won over critics, their lives behind the scenes unraveled. Fame amplified their pain, not numbed it. Their legacies endure not just for their craft, but for the haunting reality of how easily talent can be overshadowed by addiction. Michael Vincent had it all: looks, talent, and a paycheck that made him the highest paid actor on television during his time on Airwolf. But behind the scenes, his life was unraveling. Fueled by alcohol and drugs, his behavior on set became erratic. Production delays mounted, budgets ballooned, and his once promising future began to collapse under the weight of his addictions. Arrests for drunk driving, violent outbursts, and even a near-fatal car crash that left him permanently injured. Errol Flynn, decades before Vincent, was the original Hollywood bad boy. Known for his swashbuckling roles in films like Robin Hood, Flynn lived as flamboyantly as the characters he portrayed. His home was party central, filled with sex, scandal, and endless bottles of booze. So notorious was his drinking that his yacht was dubbed Cirrhosis by the Sea. He once shared a home with David Niven, who joked that no party in Malibu really started until Flynn arrived, with a bottle in each hand. Flynn's life was the epitome of excess. Rumors swirled of wild parties, affairs, and substance-fueled escapades. But the cost was immense. By his early 50s, Flynn's health had deteriorated dramatically. He collapsed in an elevator, and a doctor's blunt diagnosis made headlines. His heart and liver were so damaged, it was a miracle he had survived that long. Vincent and Flynn's paths never crossed, but their stories rhyme. Promising careers derailed by indulgence and lives cut short by choices they couldn't or wouldn't change. Their stories feel like Hollywood scripts, but the endings were heartbreakingly real. Both men had charisma in spades and were beloved by fans across generations. But charm wasn't enough to outrun the consequences. Their stories show how even the brightest stars can dim when addiction takes hold, and how quickly fame can flip into freefall when the cameras stop and real life demands accountability. Humphrey Bogart is remembered as one of the greatest leading men in film history. With his gravelly voice and unshakable demeanor, he defined a generation of cool. But off-camera, Bogart was a man of contradictions. He was known to be charming and witty until around 11:30 p.m. That's when, according to friends, he would transform. The switch was sudden, from sociable to aggressive, playful to volatile. Alcohol was the trigger. His drinking affected both his personal life and his work. On set, he was occasionally so inebriated he refused to work, once showing up in pajamas and riding a bicycle around the Warner Brothers lot. During the filming of Sahara, he refused to leave his dressing room until his then-wife delivered a thermos of martinis. He was even banned from several clubs due to drunken incidents. Despite this, Bogart maintained his reputation until the end. His constant drinking and smoking ultimately led to a cancer diagnosis that would claim his life. W.C. Fields, by contrast, leaned into his image as a grumpy, boozy comedian. But what audiences didn't know was that his on-screen persona was a diluted version of his real-life habits. Fields reportedly drank 2 quarts of gin per day. The toll was brutal: delirium tremens, hallucinations, and failing health. Eventually, Paramount dropped him. He found a second wind in radio, where he could perform without the physical demands of film. These two legends, one the suave hero, the other the comic curmudgeon, embody different sides of the same struggle. They show us that alcohol doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter whether you're delivering a punchline or a monologue. If the bottle wins, the story always ends the same. Even as the cameras rolled and audiences laughed or swooned, these men were fighting battles they couldn't always win. Their charisma masked chaos, their genius obscured by addiction. In the end, the applause couldn't drown out the toll of the bottle. Bernard Lee may not be a household name, but James Bond fans know him as M, the stern, commanding head of MI6 across 11 films. Off-screen, however, Lee was a man devastated by personal tragedy. When his wife died in a house fire, it sent him into a spiral of grief and alcoholism. The respectable authority figure on screen bore little resemblance to the man behind the scenes who struggled to stay afloat emotionally and financially. His addiction became so consuming that producers took extreme measures to keep him on track during shoots. On the set of the Edgar Wallace series, he was reportedly locked in his dressing room during breaks to prevent him from drinking. Still, he found ways around the restrictions, most infamously by bribing someone to insert a straw through the keyhole so he could sneak alcohol. His drinking was so intense that even Richard Burton, himself a legendary drinker, once admitted he couldn't keep up with Lee. Then there was Gail Russell, the hauntingly beautiful actress who never wanted to be a star. Painfully shy, she turned to alcohol to cope with the pressures of fame. Though her talent was undeniable, the studio's relentless publicity machine only worsened her anxiety. Her drinking escalated after a failed marriage and rumors of a secret affair, leading to multiple DUIs and a dwindling career. Russell's final years were marked by isolation and decline. She attempted recovery but could never fully escape the cycle. In 1961, she was found dead in her apartment, surrounded by empty bottles. The cause? Liver damage from chronic alcoholism. She was just 36. Lee and Russell remind us that addiction isn't always loud or scandalous. Sometimes it's a quiet erosion, slow, steady, and tragically irreversible. From Sinatra's fiery nights to Gail Russell's lonely end, these stars represent more than talent. They represent cautionary tales of how addiction doesn't care about Oscars, contracts, or legacies. It strikes quietly, grows quickly, and often claims everything. And yet, amid the chaos, some found strength to fight back. Others didn't. Their stories remain etched not only in film reels, but in the lessons they leave behind. Because in the end, the spotlight never stays forever, but the consequences of what happens in the dark, those last a lifetime.